Absolute Toru overload in this episode of Miss Kobayashi Dragon Maid S. Just got done with episode 11, so let's jump into it. Yeah, like I mentioned, a lot of heart, a lot of backstory, fully fleshing out Toru at this point. But yes, absolutely incredible episode, just to get all the insight into the character, and to really, again, get more insight into the heart of Toru herself. As the episode opens up, very kind of a skit-based thing to really kind of hit, again, this idea of Toru wanting to go above and beyond for Kobayashi and just showing her love that she has for Kobayashi herself. Kobayashi's having some back pains, and Toru is trying to figure out her own little way of helping Kobayashi. And it seems like the very beginning here, it really just kind of shows Kobayashi trying to find different methods of being able to relieve the pain that she's dealing with, but at the same time, kind of hitting on this idea of what Kobayashi wants versus what Toru believes that she needs. That feeling of wanting to do everything you possibly can for somebody, despite the other person possibly feeling that they're meddling. Like, is this something that Kobayashi technically wants? And this is the conundrum that Toru is essentially facing as she's trying to figure out what she can do for her. At some point, she even, hints the idea that there's something in this other world that she can use that would relieve Kobayashi of her pain. But as Makoto kind of puts it, is that technically something that she wants? He proposes this tale of this person that eats of the land of the dead and thus becomes of the land of the dead. And this is something that hits Toru kind of upsettingly in the idea that she doesn't want Kobayashi to become something of her world. This idea, well, there's this way of relieving this, but it requires her to almost give up the things of this world for the things of her world. But as we'll find out eventually as we get into Toru's backstory, that's not necessarily something that Toru wants. She doesn't necessarily want her to become something, even though we technically had this thing where she got pills for her that recovered her from her flu. That's aside. We want to focus on this story. I did kind of find that a little bit funny, the idea that she's not willing to give something of her world because she doesn't want to rely on her world and doesn't want Kobayashi to become something of her world, but yet she gave her some cat people pills that made her into a cat person. But it still hits home the point. It still hits home the idea of, this concept that she believes this is what's best for Kobayashi, but she's not technically thinking about what Kobayashi herself wants. And it does end on a really cute note where she comes home and she uses her tail to give Kobayashi like a massage therapy. It was, again, it's that thing that's like, it's a simple, subtle thing, but it's so adorable. Like, I just love this moment where Toru is able to do something for Kobayashi. And as she says, is this enough? And Kobayashi's like, yeah, this is enough. This is all I need from you. This is enough. You don't have to keep going out of your way for me. Just you being here and doing this is enough for me. And again, I thought that was really sweet. Again, really hitting heavy on this idea of just how Kobayashi just floods Toru's mind. Like, she just wants to care for Kobayashi so much. This again jumps into, yes, a whole bunch of information about Toru herself. As we open up this segment, we have this little moment where Toru is writing this perception blocking grimoire for Kana and Ilulu to help them out in the world, just to live in the world of the humans. And as Kobayashi is looking at this, she realizes, this looks awfully familiar. Yes, the way that she's writing this formula, this magical formula, is similar to the coding language they use in their business. And as she asks her director, Shota's father, hey, is this familiar? And he's like, yeah, it looks like magic code, right? That's because magicians wrote it. So he's like, if you want more information, you know where to ask. And this turns into her going up to his office to find Toru's father, the Emperor Demise. So get to meet him again. We haven't seen him since the last episode of the last season. This is a point where he's like, since you're here, is obviously something you want to ask. And yes, this turns into this point where, yeah, Kobayashi's asking why Toru came to this world. Like, what led up to her coming here? And she's like, I'm going to ask Toru this as well. I just want to hear from you. So yeah, this is when we get this big old backstory of not just Toru, but also the factions of Harmony, the factions of Chaos, and the faction of the Spectators, apparently. As we find out at some point, the dragons were all banding together in order to fight against the gods because they felt like they did not want to become under the control of somebody. And seeing this, they all banded together to fight against the gods. And this went on forever and ever, till eventually some dragons started to actually side with the gods, and some felt like they didn't want to fight anymore, so they became spectators. And sometime during this entire thing, eventually, Toru's father eventually had Toru. And it was interesting because at first it seemed like her father wanted to push upon her the mentality of the rest of the Dragons of Chaos, that humans are bad and that this is what needs to be done. But eventually he allowed her to make her own choices. He allowed her to go travel to different places, and basically make up her own mind. He gave her her own decision. Let her be her own individual. And this leads to her basically learning transformation magic. She starts walking among the humans. She finds the humans to be fighting a lot, but at the same time, they create a lot of interesting things. Eventually, she meets Kana. It was kind of a cute little scene there. Kana is like, she asked her why she became a human form, and she's like, well, I want to play tricks and collect bugs and scare people. And she's distraught because she's not able to get the attention of the humans. She just wants attention, and it leads her to tears. It was so sad. And she's like, well, no, they're trying to set up for war, and so they don't really have much time to deal with you. Really cute, really sad little scene. She goes to meet Lokoa, and Lokoa's like, you're super powerful. Why don't you fight? And Lokoa's like, I just don't really find a point in it. I don't like to fight, so peace out. Goes to meet Fafnir, and Fafnir's like, if a dragon doesn't have his own individual thoughts and their own freedom, they're not a real dragon. And this kind of, I think, is that turning point really for Toru's mentality. But eventually this leads to this point where Toru is struggling with herself. She's had all these different opinions. Kana wants to have the attention of humans. Lokoa just wants to be free and doesn't want to deal with fighting. She doesn't see there a point to fighting. Fafnir is all about freedom and individuality. He's like, if you don't have your own thoughts, then what are you? And this eventually leads to this inner conflict with Toru in that, she has her father as part of the Chaos faction. He's the Emperor of Demise. I have to do this, right? Well, here's freedom. Well, here's the desire to be wanted by somebody. Here's all these different thoughts, and this leads to this inner conflict in her that eventually leads her to wanting freedom. And that leads her to taking on the gods to want to stop everything. She just wants to put an end to all this. And obviously, as we know, she gets struck down. And she actually went to fight them on her own, but she leaves her injured, and that's when Kobayashi actually ends up finding her. And that's when we get to the point we are now, where she is now with Kobayashi. It was really cute to see, after the father tells her the story, that at least the side that he knew, not the sides of her actual feelings, he's like, I still don't approve of you two. And at the same time, Shota's father comes up and is like, he doesn't really mean that entirely. He actually went to bat for you with the gods of this world to get Kobayashi the freedom that she needs in order to live with you. So don't take that. I'm thinking father's a little bit tsundere in that regard. I don't approve of you two, but make sure to take care of you while you have your limited lifespan. It was really cute. And I guess we technically got that sense from him in the first season. He really did technically approve of what Toru wanted. This is what Toru wants, and he respects that, and he wants Toru to be happy. And we get a sense of that as well in the story itself, is the idea that he chose to allow Toru to make up her own mind. He gave Toru the freedom to choose what she wants, not to live in exactly the shadow that he has. And I thought that was really cute. But yeah, overall, a fantastic episode. Getting more insight into Toru. I love the baby Toru scenes. Young Toru. Get to see where she first met Kana. Kana was adorable. I felt so bad for her. She just wants attention. Seeing Fafnir's ugly self again. He's just so menacing. Seeing Lokoa. Lokoa is humongous. Has some funny scenes kind of mixed throughout there. I like when the Emperor Demise points out the fact that he named Toru after an author, a human author, that apparently hasn't wrote anything yet, because Shota's father apparently used clairvoyance to look into the future to read this book, and he basically plagiarized the story. And that's interesting. Apparently Toru is a future author. Maybe it might be actually Toru herself, and he just plagiarized the book that Toru would eventually want to write. I don't know. Lots of scenes of Toru trying to feed Kobayashi her tail again, wanting her so badly to eat her. Just really cute though, very adorable, a very wholesome and heartfelt episode that I just absolutely love to death. It is a continuation of my dread that technically next episode is our final episode. I'm not looking forward to it ending, but it has to end eventually sometime. But definitely enjoy this episode. Looking forward to the finale next week. I hope you guys will join me here as I talk about that finale, and we can all come together and sorrow together as we face the end of Miss Kobayashi Dragon Maid again, until hopefully we get a third season as well. But hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a like down below, comment, let me know what you thought of the episode. Subscribe if you haven't already. Share this video if you can. Support us on Patreon if you can. And we appreciate all of our Patreon supporters. And with that said, y'all take care.